All right, everyone. Welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 14 recap. So unfortunately, this week we only have 2 matchups to talk about. So this shouldn't be a 90-minute long recap. And some interesting things happened this week. A lot of low scores. People who not sure they deserved to get a win this week, but they had to. Somebody had to win one of these matchups. So we might as well just get right into it and start with that one. How about it? Which was, I guess we'll start with this one then. Since the other one was the matchup of the week, we'll get into the other one there. Probably more to talk about in that matchup anyway. But this one was quite the dud, as FC Bohoric went up against the Bad Luck Bears. Bad Luck Bears last week dropped down to the number 6 seed. Got up against FC Bohoric, and it was looking pretty good going into Sunday because FC Bohoric had Matt Ryan, who only scored 21 points. So it was looking pretty good there for Bad Luck Bears. And he shuffled his lineup a little bit. Both of the teams that lost this week went against the starting quarterback who basically got them here. Which, I know you're thinking this, you're going to say, Craig, but at least he didn't start Kirk Cousins, who he started Garofalo over Kirk Cousins, but Garoppolo was actually the correct play. He scored more points. I get that. I understand. But I'm talking like a cosmic, karmic universe terms here. That you went against the guy who got you here, and this is what happened for both of you. So it's interesting. Probably just interesting to me on that perspective. But so, Jay, you benched Jared Goff, who was at home. I think I said this last week, or maybe on the lineup. I don't understand why you're so scared of the Eagles. You did it last week with Seattle's defense. You did it this week by benching Goff, who is the guy that got you here. You started Josh McCown, and one of the worst quarterback performances I think we've ever seen. He played a lot of the game. He got you 4 points and ended up getting hurt and out of the game. And his backup, Bryce Petty, came in and got you an extra 3.7, I believe, was the total. So you ended up, despite FC Bohoric only getting 21 from Matt Ryan, you actually ended up with, I think it was 3.4, I think. You ended up with 7.4. I got my notes here real quick. The Jets, because we had to add those points in because McCown got hurt in the game, so you had to add the quarterback points for Bryce Petty, who played maybe half the game, maybe a little bit less, but said he only got you 7.4. Jimmy Graham, 0. Oh, and also the Seattle Seahawks defense. Seahawks defense, 0. So 2 zeros from those Seahawks guys. I mean, you made some good moves, putting Freeman in the flex, even though it looked like he actually didn't catch any passes. But you kept Deshaun Jackson in. I think I said you should put Freeman in the flex and start Julio and Sanu, and hopefully one of them, if not both, does. So at least 2 or 3 of them do pretty well. Freeman did good. Actually, Frank Gore did pretty good. He was over 100 yards for you. Fournette was also over 100 yards and a touchdown. But if you had kept in Goff or you had put in Sanu over Deshaun Jackson, which I definitely would have done, this matchup goes the other way. So your defense, you also had Tampa Bay is your only other one versus Detroit. Looks like they actually would have won you the game as well. But I mean, Seattle defense did well, not great, but fairly well against the Eagles last week. So it was tough to sit them, especially against Blake Bortles, who could throw a bunch of. Anytime he's there, he can throw a couple interceptions for you. Wasn't expect. So they had 1 turnover, but they gave up. So they lost, and they gave up too much of everything. So they actually ended up getting you 0. So unfortunate for you there. So this is probably a matchup that if I'm Jay, it's going to take a while for this to get over this. Tinkering with your lineup, and it ended up kind of shooting yourself in the foot here. Is that better? Anyway, so the final score, I don't think I ever mentioned it, was 119.45 to 116.6. So neither team was able to get over 120 this week. For FC Bohoric with his victory, he had AJ Green, Keenan Allen, and Alshon Jeffrey. Looks like Green 9.5, Allen 17, and Jeffrey just over 16. Running backs, I think going into Monday night, FC Bohoric was actually down. Let's see. 15.2, I want to say. So but he still had Dion Lewis and Rex Burkhead. And so Dion Lewis only got you 17 yards, so 1.7. But Burkhead actually covered the difference himself since he was in the flex. Pretty much everything, all his stats came from receiving, but he also had a rushing touchdown. I think he only had like 6 or 7 rushing yards, but he did get a touchdown, and his 16.3 covered the deficit that you needed there to get the win here. Let's see, like I said, Lewis, he only had 1.7. Kareem Hunt, he was back over 100 yards. He got you, and he got a touchdown, so he got you about 20. Cameron Brate, tight end, only 2. Hauschka, only 1. Your defense was the Rams. Not scared to play them against the Eagles. They had a touchdown, a blocked kick, a turnover. Yahoo says 14. I think that actually was the correct score because they gave up a ton of points and they lost. So a lot of points, a lot of yards. They lost the game, so didn't really get to tack on any extra points for rushing or passing yards there. But just enough, like I said, for Jay. Said you only got 7 points from your quarterback. Julio went for almost 15. Golden Tate, he went for 22.5. And Deshaun Jackson was only, let's see, he had some rushing yards there. We had to cut off. He only got you 8. Sanu would have been 20, and Goff would have been 32 there. Fournette said he was just over 100 yards and a touchdown. Gore, 130 yards, no touchdowns. Freeman, 15. Kicker was Elliott. He had a couple field goals, a bunch of PATs. He actually did pretty good for you. And like I said, Jimmy Graham and Seattle defense both got you donuts in this matchup. So that's just I don't really know what to say. Not because there's really what can you do about that? Nothing really. I think Bad Luck Bears probably should have won this one, but you tinkered a little too much. So I would have stuck with Goff, and at least I would have played Sanu. I think I did say it in the video last week previewing the matchup, even though it didn't seem like the matchup, neither your matchup before this year wasn't really influenced either way by all those Falcons having Justin having Matt Ryan and you having his receivers. Didn't really seem to swing the matchup one way or the other, but this time it definitely would have if you had stuck with Sanu, but you didn't. I don't know what it is about Deshaun Jackson that people seem to have this attachment to him. Got to put him in the lineup every week. As far as I'm concerned, no thank you, but that's it. So FC Bohoric, he sneaks this victory. He moves on. Bad Luck Bears, you will be playing in the meaningless 5th place game on Yahoo. We say goodbye to you for 2017. You, let's see, actually just received your payment yesterday for your league dues. Guess you must have missed the memo, though, because you only owed 15 instead of 45 because you got 30 back from the splitting the knockout pool with Brian. So you'll be getting either some of that money back, or we can always hold on to it and count it toward your dues for next year. And FC Bohoric, he is the number 3 seed, and he is not the lowest seed to move on. So that means FC Bohoric will be going up against Shawshank Athletics next week. All right. Somehow I'm already I just talked about that for 10 minutes. I don't know how the time goes by so fast whenever I'm just sitting here talking a little bit about one matchup. But all right, next. We had the matchup of the week, and it was the Skellahort Isotopes. Big underdogs going up against Space Antelope. Maybe not big underdogs, but the projections were definitely in favor of Space Antelope this week, as the Isotopes just had to squeak their way into the playoffs, and they end up pulling this one out in a big way. The final score here, Isotopes 188.55 to Space Antelope 125.8. So about a 60-point margin there. Let's see. In defeat, let's go through Space Antelope here, because he was tinkering with his lineup all week long. Let me bring up his bench here too. So he lost Mixon last week to injury, so he was out. Didn't have him. You played Kenyon Drake, who actually ended up being a pretty good play, even though we did have to cut a lot of his stats off because they were receiving yards and catches there, but he did go over 100 yards. No touchdowns, though, I think. So he actually got you almost 15 points. Not too bad there, but you're kind of handcuffed with your 2 tight ends. You got Engram and Kelsey. You want to start both of them. Then you got to sacrifice those running back stats in the flex there. So that's always a risky play, one way or the other. It's a gamble. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. So tinkering with your lineup. Space Antelope here also benched his quarterback, who got him here through most of the season. And like I said before, actually turned out to be, fantasy football-wise, the best play for you, because you went with Garoppolo, who scored 40.5, and Kirk Cousins actually only scored about 25. So you gained 15 points or so there. It's like actually 16 from benching Cousins for Garoppolo. You're going back and forth too with your wide receivers there. I'm sure you're praying, praying and praying and praying that you'd make it to week 15 because you got Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson. Jordy Nelson, who's been riding the bench, big factor here in the season for Space Antelope. Even if next week you would still go back to Kirk Cousins, so you still got Aaron Rodgers there coming back, which means you'd probably be getting Jordy Nelson back in the lineup because he has been absolute garbage since Rodgers went out. Let's take a quick look at Jordy Nelson's game log. It must have been, it was the Minnesota game, that's right, whenever Aaron Rodgers got hurt early in that game when he went out. So up until then, Jordy Nelson had been over 20. He missed the week 2 game with an injury, if I remember correctly. But he was at 21, 23, 23, 10.5. Actually, the game that Aaron Rodgers got hurt, he ended up scoring 12. But after that, so from week 7 until now, Jordy Nelson, his highest score is 7.5. So obviously he has been riding the bench all of these weeks. You're probably hoping to get a chance to put him back in the lineup here for week 15, but it is not to be. I said, who else did you have? You had T.Y. Hilton. You're going back and forth between him and I think Doug Baldwin was on your bench for a little while. Goodwin was you're going back and forth between, Goodwin, Baldwin, and Hilton. You were kind of juggling those 3 guys with 2 spots for most of the weekend there. And let's see, Hilton ended up, it ended up being, I think you had Shepard in your lineup most of the time, even though so I think he was kind of questionable. Was he had an illness or something there? But he actually ended up being, I think he was the only one who was in your starting lineup nonstop without getting shuffled around. And he actually ended up being the guy who scored the least amount of points for you, as Baldwin and Goodwin both scored about 16.5, but Shepard got only 3.5 for you there. Running backs, like I said, Drake got about 15, but Latavius Murray, actually most of his stats came from receiving, so he only got you 1.5. Engram was 9.5, and then Kelsey, like I said, you had went with the 2 tight ends, hoping for a big game from him, but he only got you 14.5. Kicker was Tucker. He made 5 PATs, but only 1 field goal. Probably hoping for a little bit more there. But perhaps the biggest difference maker in this matchup, said even though it ended up being a 60-point difference here, which certainly was unexpected. I have to say it was the Bengals defense. They actually scored you -1. So it was a home game. It was the Bears. Trubisky has been awful. They've barely had a passing game. It's been all running all season long. But this is probably, I mean, it's why last week, I think when they went through the podcast preview, I had the Bears defense still in there. I was going back and forth on my defenses all week. And I think Chicago actually would have been a decent play because I really just felt strongly that the Bengals, on that short week after the Monday night game against the Steelers, where they they lost a lot of people went down to injury and things like that, and on their defense, it was a tough loss. I think the Steelers pulled it out right at the end. Just felt like the Bengals were gonna be maybe they put all their energy into that Steelers game and went down and just weren't mentally or physically prepared for that game against the Bears, which is kind of what I thought was a definite possibility, but still, it's tough to, with all the weapons that the Bengals have, it's hard to always doesn't seem like they should they should always seems like they should do better than they sometimes end up doing, especially with AJ Green and some of those other guys. But like I said, the Bengals, they got routed by the Bears. Too much of everything. Like I said, they only got 2 sacks, no turnovers, and they actually scored you -1. As for the Isotopes, definitely we had some surprises in this matchup. I'm laughing right now because I think they might get into it in the podcast here later in the week, but Justin just recently, at the end of the night at work here, brought it to my attention, one of the podcasts he listens to, how they were getting some laughs, and we got some laughs as well, about anybody who had started Rod Smith or Jonathan Stewart this week. They basically said that it would have taken just huge balls for anyone to have started either one of those guys this week. And they were talking about, I think they first started talking about Rod Smith, but then they were like, well, I got another one for you, Jonathan Stewart, and they're laughing. Like, they wanted, actually screen capped the matchup and tweeted it to them, because they basically said, we don't really think anyone had the stones to start one of those guys, especially Jonathan Stewart against Minnesota this week. So they were like, either, picture or it didn't happen. So of course, Justin and I got a good laugh about that, and had to tweet it at them and said, hey, look here, actually started both of those guys. So hopefully, maybe Brian and Detling will get into that a little bit more. Maybe they'll get the podcast and play that clip so everybody can hear it, because it's quite entertaining. And I'm sure Detling's got a lot of things to say about the matchup as well, and especially those two players. But anyway, if you get a chance, I think it's the Fantasy Footballers is the podcast this week. They do a little bit of talking about those two guys and how you were either crazy or just had gigantic balls to start those guys this week. So, and of course, it was beyond my expectations. Either one of those guys, I was really hoping for not. As always, with the guys in the running back spot, you're really just hoping for 50, 60 yards, or maybe like 30, 40 and a touchdown from both of those guys. That's pretty much all I ever expect from them. Anything else, really anybody in that running back spot, unless you luck out and can get somebody who is consistently running well, or Tree Size trades all of his running backs to you, then you're stocked with those running backs who get basically are the offense, like McCoy and Howard and Zeke and guys like that. But anyway, so for the Isotopes, we had Derek Carr. So yeah, I mean, actually, going up and down the lineup here, I mean, a lot of matchups went in favor of Space Antelope here. Quarterback, he actually got, Derek Carr only had 35, so it was about a 6-point difference in favor of Antelope there. And as for the wide receivers for the Isotopes, Fitzgerald, Tyreek Hill, and Marvin Jones. Fitzgerald and Jones both had 9.4, and Hill had 11.5. So really only about 30 points combined from the three Isotopes wide receivers. And the Space Antelopes three receivers, looks like they went for actually about 35, 36, something like that. So top of the rosters, swings it in favor of Space Antelope there. But then we get, and even at tight end there, picked up Anderson to play him over since Gronk was suspended. he only got 3.5 to Ingram's 9.5 there. Flex plays was Gurley, who doubled up Kelsey, 28-14. Kickers were pretty even, 9-7. But then Kansas City Chiefs defense ended up playing them. I believe they got about 33 points against the Raiders. Didn't like playing Carr versus my defense, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do and hope that your defense does okay. Then turnovers from your quarterback basically balance out there, and said hoping to get some completions there and hold them to a low amount of rushing yards there. So it worked out okay for Kansas City's defense there, but said again the biggest difference here was the running backs, as Rod Smith, even though we had to chop off 15 or 16 of his points because they were all receiving yards, but one of them happened to be a long touchdown, so we tacked that on. He actually had 2 touchdowns, and although I think he only had about 47 rushing yards, but that long touchdown, that's 9 points. So he actually got about 20. And then Jonathan Stewart, he actually went for just over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. I believe his number on Yahoo is correct, 31.3. So about 50. Did I write it down? Yeah, just about 51 points combined from Rod Smith and Jonathan Stewart. I was hoping, best case scenario, to get about 10 points from each guy, and ended up getting 25. So that's just the way it goes sometimes. Was it lucky? Absolutely. Well, those guys, I think it was Jonathan Stewart's one of the best games of his career, and one of the worst games of the Vikings in terms of running all season. I think they were the number 1 team against the run. But I just kind of had to bank on it being a home game and hoping that Stewart would maybe punch in a touchdown there. Same thing with Rod Smith. They were up against the Giants. Giants are kind of reeling. Best case scenario, hope for about 30 to 40 yards, maybe punch in a touchdown somewhere in there. If not, that's okay, because the running back spots are one of the ones, they're probably the least important. Besides the kicker, they're one of the least important positions there. You can pretty much, at least that's always been my perspective, that you can pretty much plug anybody in there and get some points. Of course, that's going to change next year when everything is different. Those positions will all be just as valuable. The flex spot will be, the value of that flex spot will be diminished, and it'll basically just be putting in whoever you, a player of whatever position you feel is the most valuable in that spot there. So I think that's it. So Isotopes got 188 to 125. They move on, and being the number 5 seed, the Isotopes will have to play the number 1 seed, which is the Hillbillies on PCP. Now, I should have done this before I started doing the review, because last week's, if Hillbillies on PCP had actually played a game last week, they very well could have broken the record for points in a single week here. Just while we're doing it, so let me take a quick look at Hillbillies on PCP. The single week record is 275 point something here. Just let me take a quick look while we got some time here at his lineup. And let's see, McCoy had no receiving stats. Howard had only 1 for 8. So Yahoo said 222.25. So basically with, if you cut away Jordan Howard's 1.8, but Lutz had a field goal, let's see what his field goal was. Most of the numbers are going to get jacked up by the Broncos if he had used the Broncos defense here. So only an extra 0.4 onto your kicker's stats. So that means we cut 1.4 from your total there. So let's just say you're right around 221. And let's see how many points we would have had to add on to the Denver Broncos defense. Excuse me. Looks like they had 3, 6, 10. The shutout gives you 25. So we would have added, and they got the win, so there's an extra 3. And take a look at the box score here. First downs, only 6. So that would have been another 6, so an extra 9 points. Yards rushing, 59. So that would have been another 6. So that is, 15. And passing, only 41 passing yards. So that would have been 9. So we would tack on an extra 24. Right? I believe. So you actually would have, now you wouldn't have broken the record, but you would have been, said 221 plus 24 would have been, 245 points this week. So, the good news is your team exploded this week, and hopefully they will not repeat such a thing. It happened against nobody. No one's going to remember what Hillbillies on PCP did in Week 14 of 2017, probably except for Brian. So none of that matters. Just take a quick peek at the matchups here for Week 15 here, since that is, of course, mostly the responsibility of the podcasters. Said Shawshank will be going up against FC Bahoric. They are basically even in projections. Looks like it's going to be a good matchup. Josh has a lot of Q's next to his players' names. Let's see. He's hoping to get Robert Woods back, maybe Kelvin Benjamin from injury. He's got his Jacksonville defense going against his DeAndre Hopkins, which actually might be okay because Hopkins, I imagine, is going to be the entire Texans offense this week. As for FC Bahoric, so right now he's got Collins in, the running back from the Ravens. He's been doing pretty well. Kareem Hunt in there, going with the Saints defense against the Jets, who are probably going to be starting Bryce Petty. So that's going to be a tough matchup. Should be a good defensive matchup there for Saints, and for Saints versus Jacksonville will be possibly the matchup to watch here that swings this matchup one way or the other. Said Green, Allen, and Jeffrey for FC. Those are going to be tough to match with for Shawshank, considering said Benjamin's been playing through some injuries. Robert Woods looks like he might be coming back from his injury, but who knows? I think it was a shoulder injury. Who knows if he'll be how effective he'll be in this matchup. Said Greg Olsen coming back as your tight end. He's he's question mark too with that foot injury. He had to go out when he tried to come back. Let's see, he hasn't really done anything. Did he play in week 14? I'm not even sure. Looks like he had one target, but nothing. So that's going to be a risky play. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, like I said, Matt Ryan versus Tom Brady should be a great matchup. Saints and Jacksonville Jaguars should be a great defensive matchup there too. And we'll see what happens because there's a lot of question marks in between, especially for Shawshank, I think. If I had to just take a quick look and say, who do I think is going to win this matchup? I would have to go with FC Bahoric. because Shawshank's been in a slump the past few weeks. Even Tom Brady's been in a, even though it didn't really matter last week. I think your team still actually did fairly poorly. A lot of people said questionable with injuries and stuff like that. Even Greg Olsen, he's got nothing next to him, but I'd be a little bit worried about that. Perrine's got a Q next to his name. So a lot of risky plays in Shawshank's lineup. So that's probably, for me, that's going to be the biggest difference maker there. So you got some pretty good. So the quarterback and defense matchups here are going to be pretty solid. But in the middle, you got to swing it in favor of FC Bohoric. Thanks to all those guys with injuries. Too many question marks. Who knows how well they're going to perform. So, yeah, I'm going with FC this week. And the other matchup, of course, will be the number 1 seed, Hillbillies on PCP, going up against the Skellahort Isotopes. The Hillbillies are about a 30-point favorite on Yahoo right now. Going to be a good matchup. I think it's going to be a little bit closer than Yahoo thinks it's going to be. I think I match up okay. It's going to be all right. So, Brian, your team went crazy last week, so I'm kind of hoping that they come back down to earth a little bit. So instead of 245, excuse me, maybe get around, hoping for let's say 165 to 175, something in there. Obviously, I'm hoping for much less, but hopefully they come back down to that because I think quietly the Isotopes have been kind of on a roll the past couple weeks too, in the 180s and 190s for about at least 2 or 3 weeks in a row here. So we've been quietly on a roll, hoping to keep that trend continuing here. Going to be a good matchup, fairly certain. I'm going to be going with the Kansas City Chiefs defense, who will be going up against your quarterback, Philip Rivers, unless you make any changes there. I'm still not entirely sold on the Chiefs defense right now, but my other 2 defenses are on the road, and they are at home. So we'll see what happens there. But so that could be interesting there. You got the Broncos defense that they just had a monster game against the Jets, but now they're going on the road on a short week in Indianapolis against the Colts. Probably going to be a pretty good score there for you from the Broncos, but hoping that the Colts. So Thursday night games are usually kind of duds, so it's always an opportune chance to get your defense in there if you can. So hoping Indianapolis is able to. So Denver, maybe hopefully a little bit tired there. I'm traveling on a short week. Indianapolis will maybe surprise them a little bit. Not give you too many points there. So what would it have been like? What would their score have been last week? Because we tacking on like 20. What was it, 24, something like that. So they actually would have been at about 50 last week. So hopefully we can chop that in half this week to maybe 20, 25. Hopefully less, but best case scenario, maybe about 20 points there. Anyway, come on, Yahoo. Get me back to the matchup here this week. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong here. Yahoo's running real slow. Get back to the matchup. Come on. Still waiting. Let me try this. All right, back to the matchup. It's going to be, I think it looks lopsided on paper, but I think it's going to be closer than people suspect. Said McCoy and Jordan Howard for Hillbillies both went over 100 yards and touchdowns last week. Hopefully they come back to earth a little bit this week. Maybe stay under 100 yards. Said Rod Smith and Jonathan Stewart, certainly not expecting them to pull off 30-point performances again this week. Maybe keep this one kind of close. Thielen, Antonio Brown, and Demaryius Thomas versus Fitzgerald, Tyreek, and Marvin Jones right now. So Antonio Brown is just, it's frustrating to not have him anymore and to just watch what he's been doing because it's been just bananas. But hopefully, if there was ever a chance that Antonio Brown might come back to earth and have a quiet game, it's going to be against New England here, who might just double team him and try to take him, which, as they like to do, take somebody out of the game. Hopefully that'll be Antonio Brown. Limit him to his production. Hopefully something under 20 would be nice, but he's just been putting on a show this year. Whether or not some people like him off the field, you can't deny that his production on the field and the things that he does. I mean, he led the Steelers to that comeback victory over the Ravens last week. The guy's he's phenomenal. There's really, to try and argue against it is basically, it's just your personal opinion and stubbornness. Again, more than anything else. But anyway, said Gronk versus Delaney Walker and Gurley versus McCaffrey there. Should be pretty good matchups, and I think it's going to be a lot closer than Yahoo said it's going to be. I think it's really going to ride on how McCoy and Howard do. If they have huge games again this week, it's going to go in favor of Hillbillies on PCP. But if they can stay under 100 yards, maybe only 1 or 2 touchdowns from them, if Rod Smith and Jonathan Stewart can get kind of what I always hope from them, maybe a touchdown there from one of them and just like 50 yards-ish, 50, 60 yards, and maybe a touchdown between the two of them is all I'm ever really hoping for. So hopefully we can get that. And then I think the receivers can keep pace. We got some good there's good matchups here. We'll know pretty early because Hillbillies is going to have Denver and Demaryius Thomas there on Thursday night. We've got some Saturday matchups this week, so that'll be interesting to see what happens there. So by Sunday, the matchup will kind of be falling into place. I don't think anyone has, as of right now, has anybody on Monday night. It's the Falcons and Buccaneers. Still considering the Falcons' defense there for that one, even though it is on the road. So we'll see how that goes. So I think the wide receivers, all three. The only thing is that the Isotopes wide receivers were kind of quiet last week. Fitzgerald, Tyreek, and Marvin Jones. So maybe hoping for a bounce back. So was able to get a win last week with those guys, all three of them being pretty quiet. So hoping for a bounce back from them this week. Maybe put up some big numbers. Hoping that Thielen comes back to earth a little bit. Demaryius Thomas, hoping that he doesn't do too much. He's been up and down all year long. And then again, hoping that New England tries to take Antonio out of the game as much as they can. Gronk and Gurley should outperform Walker and McCaffrey, in my opinion. Kickers, they're both pretty good. Should be a good one for both of them. And so it's going to come down to how Philip Rivers performs against that Chiefs defense. If we go with that Chiefs defense, and if Brian still goes with with Philip Rivers there. And I think it's gonna be a closer matchup. I am not optimistic. I believe several weeks ago, seems like ages ago, I said that Hillbillies on PCP was probably the favorite to take the Tonto Bowl this year. And I see no reason to believe otherwise, especially if they can get through this week and to the Tonto Bowl with and Ezekiel Elliott will be coming back. So you're only going to be stronger going into the Tonto Bowl if you can get there. But so the Isotopes have kind of been on a roll. Had a quiet week from the receivers last week. Hopefully they can bounce back and maybe upset the number 1 seed here. I said I'm not optimistic, and it's a very good chance that I will be doing the same thing I did last week, where I just avoid any information. Once I set my lineup and was like, I'm not going to look at it. I don't want to hear or read anything, because if I do, and that's all I'll be able to think about and worry about all day long. And it'll be all weekend long because there's Saturday and Sunday games. So it worked out fairly good for me this past week, not in terms of what happened, the results, but in terms of like stress level. Justin was actually driving me nuts because he was constantly checking it. This could happen, this could happen, this could happen. I need this. I need to stop doing this, and things are going on. But once I set my lineup, I was like, I'm not going to look at my phone or I'm not going to put it on TV. And I think by 4:30, when I was just probably about, so it was probably about 4 whenever I was on my way to work, going to work there, when I said something on the lineup that I wasn't paying any attention. And really, and of course, as soon as I did that, a Yahoo touchdown notification popped up for, I think it was the Rod Smith 80-yard touchdown. I was like, oh, well, it's a receiving touchdown, so get the 3 points, going to cut off the receiving stats there. So, but I tried to avoid it, and I avoided it for as long as I could. But then, so I think Detling's team was pretty much done after the 1 o'clock games for the most part. So it was definitely, at least in terms of, and then once I got back into the lineup and was scrolling back through to see what had gone on in the conversation there, said people were, there was a lot of chatter. Detling was pissed at some of the things going on. So at least from a mental perspective, it was definitely a bit of a relief to ignore the activity during those 1 o'clock games and just kind of let the fates decide what happens and just kind of accept it one way or the other. If the results had been different, I think it would have made it a lot easier to accept defeat this past week here. So so I think actually Justin he owes a letter of thanks to Jay for tanking in week 13 and dropping behind the Isotopes, getting that matchup this week, because that's the only way FC Bohoric would be moving on. If FC Bohoric ends up winning the Tonto Bowl this year, it's going to be interesting how that difference will have been the key to getting him the right matchup in week 14 to propel him up to the top there. But not going to get too far ahead of ourselves. So just like last week, we're going to have 2 really good matchups this week. Looking forward to it. And looking forward to seeing what the podcasters have to say, especially with Detling being finished now for the season. I'm sure he's got a few choice words to use about Jonathan Stewart and Rod Smith. So looking forward to that. 2 good matchups here this week, as again we say goodbye for 2017 to Jay and Detling. Only 4 teams left. So even if you lose this week, you still can play for number 3 next week and maybe take I think $50, turn the season into a little bit of a profit. So we'll see what happens there. So these matchups, said Justin and Josh, Battle of the Jays. The projections are almost even right now, so that should be pretty good. Looking forward to that. And Hillbillies versus Isotopes. Said it's a 30-point favorite here on Yahoo for the Hillbillies, but I think the matchup's going to end up being a lot closer than that. Again, not optimistic, but I think we're going to give the Hillbillies on PCP a definite run for their money in this matchup. So, looking forward to it. Excited to see what happens. And I think that's it. So, I'm not sure anybody's really watching these anymore because pretty much everyone is out. So, all right. Good luck to the last 4 teams here in 2017 in the playoffs. Going to be some good matchups. And after this week, we will know who's going to play in Tonto Bowl 15. So excited for that. Will we have a Kitchen of Love Tonto Bowl? It's a possibility. It's a long shot, but it's definitely a possibility. So, all right. We'll see you back here next week as we will review the semifinals and maybe give a little preview to Tonto Bowl 15. All right, everyone. I think that's it. Nothing else to mention. Nope. All right, great matchups this week. Looking forward to it. Win or lose, going to be fun. So good luck to everyone this week, and we'll see what happens. See you back here again next week, if anyone's still listening. All right, guys. Thanks again. Bye-bye.